Welcome to the Clear Admit MBA Admissions Academy. I'm Graham Richmond, and I'm with Alex Brown for a lesson on interviews. And this one is particularly about virtual interviewing, Alex. So this is something that, some schools have done for ages with candidates located in far-flung places, but the pandemic brought this to the fore.
Yeah.
So, because schools don't travel as much or weren't during the pandemic at least, and, with COVID, et cetera. So this is really common now. And I think there's another flavor of a virtual interview, which is more of an automated interview that we see in the admissions process too, where some candidates, even as part of the application, have to record an interview with their computer, basically, where the online application asks them questions and they have to answer. And so there's no one on the other end, but it's
right.
recording. So those are the two pieces. And the reason I put them together is because we've already talked in the other lessons about interviews about kinds of questions you'll get and how to answer them and that sort of stuff. But I think it's important in this lesson, what I want to talk about is just how to get it right when it comes to virtual interviews, because it's a whole different ball game.
Yeah.
And so this is more of a, tactical set of tips, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
There are a number of things that come to my mind immediately, for instance, getting your tech right. We've all been on the Zoom call with the person who, you can't hear them and it's because the headpiece they have is not working, or, there's whatever the case, like there's some tech that they're coming in and out because they're disconnected from the internet or whatever the case. So, you got to be ready, right?
Yeah. Basically, you've got to let the tech work for you and not against you. And tech's very important. It's your interface with whomever's interviewing you, or if it's an automated experience. And not only do you need to get your tech right, you need to trust that you have the tech right, because you don't want to be nervous about your interview because you're nervous that your tech's going to crash.
Right.
That's going to really sort of make the interview experience not pleasant at all.
And I think you need to take everything into account. And this is going to sound silly, but like, if 4 people in your home or wherever you're living decide to be, watching Netflix while you're on your interview, and that's going to suck up all the bandwidth in your house. So think about that. Like, really prepare for everything. Make sure, and if you need to go somewhere, a co-working space or get a room at your office and a dedicated time for quiet and everything. So that's important. Getting the tech right.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in the audio being right as well.
Yeah.
So, and what I mean by that is I think you need to have a headset. I think, it's really hard when you're speaking at the computer and the audio of the people that you're speaking with is coming out of your speakers and going right back in, and people get an echo, or there are all kinds of things that can happen. And so it can make a big difference just to have, a headset on, and to have a microphone, an external microphone. These things are not expensive, and they're quite good these days. So spending a little bit of money and time to get your, speakers and microphone in good order is worth it.
Yeah.
The other thing is, and I think I talked to you about this the other day, actually, this is getting and staying in frame. So, I know you do a lot of lectures and things as a part of some of the work you do, and you're on screen a lot.
Yeah,
so what do we mean by that when we talk about getting and staying in frame?
Just make sure that, you're in picture, and whoever, again, is interviewing you can feel a connection whilst they're interviewing you. I think that's really important. So there's some level of animation that you're bringing to your interview. So, not that you're just completely stiff and so on and so forth. It can be challenging in a virtual space. You want to be practicing this a little bit before you go into your first interview, because it's definitely not trivial to make sure that you can then connect directly with your interviewer.
Yeah, and I think a related point, which I want to touch on, is making eye contact, which sounds sort of simple, but isn't, right? Because for many people, they think eye contact is them looking at the interviewer, when in reality, they kind of need to be looking at the webcam.
Yeah.
Right. So, and usually those are close enough, but there are some, laptops and computers where the webcam's like sort of a little bit off center, or so making sure that you're making eye contact with the webcam so that the experience for the person on the other end is good
Yeah.
is important, right?
Yeah.
I also think that, you know, it's important to do a background check. And I know in admissions, we talk about background checks in an entirely different context of like, did you have the job you said and all that stuff. But here I'm talking about like what's behind you when you're having your interview, and is it a really distracting background? Are there cars driving by in the background? Or, are you sitting in a room where all the light is shining out at, at the, at the audience instead of on you, right? So just knowing that stuff's all right too. And this is why, whether it's Zoom or Skype or whatever, they all have the ability for you to pull it up on screen and check it out, see how you look, make sure that the background's okay.
I would also add to that though, Graham, you can make the background work to your advantage. Mm-hmm. So rather than just make sure everything's neutral and you've not got anything distracting in your background, maybe you can add one or two elements into your background that actually enhances the interview experience for the interviewer, or maybe it sort of helps showcase and highlight something important about you. Right. So if your passion or your hobby that you talk about in your candidacy is, I don't know, mountain climbing or whatever, and there's an image of you climbing a mountain in the background, maybe that's fair game. But there are things that you might want to do in your background to enhance, as well as remove things that distract. Yeah,
so better to be in front of a bookcase as opposed to in front of a set of, Xboxes and Nintendo game players or something, right? So, thinking about what's behind you, very good point. Yeah. What about dress? Because we now live in this era where no one wears a suit and tie anymore. Yeah. Everyone's working in sweatpants from home, or even if they're going to the office. There's a sort of new set of standards. But what would you wear for a virtual interview?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the top's important, and that stuff. But frankly, I would wear the whole kit as if I was going for an interview. Why is that? One, it makes me feel better about myself. I look sharp, and that's good, and that's a reason why you dress up for these things. It gives you that confidence and that look. So I think that's absolutely worth doing. And secondly, you just don't know what's going to happen in the interview. You might actually have to get up and do something. It'd be quite embarrassing if you had to get up in the middle of the interview and you didn't even have your boxer shorts on or something. That would be a problem. So
So, and I think that actually speaks to another thing, which is another tip here, which is minimize interruptions. So ideally, Amazon's not ringing at the door, or three kids aren't pounding down the door, coming and crashing the interview. So, but if that does happen, yes, being fully dressed from head to toe in the right sort of gear makes sense. So minimize interruptions and dress the part. I think no one's ever going to complain and say, "Wow, that guy, he was wearing a dress shirt and a tie or whatever." Whereas they might say, t-shirt and sweats for their MBA admissions interview. That was an interesting call, right? Yeah. So the last thing that we always preach is just practice. Yeah. And what's great about today versus say when you and I were first getting started in this field is that everyone in their pocket has a device which they can use to practice with. They can set their phone down and answer interview questions and look and see exactly how they sound, and as we said earlier, they can practice with the computer, whatever they're using for the interview too. You can do everything you need to make sure that the experience is going to be good. So practice makes perfect, as it does in almost anything. But it's important. I mean, virtual interviews are here to stay. I really believe that many of the things that schools used to do, traveling to every corner of the globe, it's not going to happen anymore in terms of it's just not efficient. And so a virtual interview is fine, but you got to be ready, and there's some different things to take into account.
Absolutely.
So next up in the Admissions Academy, we've got a lesson on something that happens after you interview, not to everyone, but to many folks, and that is what happens when you're waitlisted. So stay tuned.